All right, all you gamers, let's go over the Peat Bogs of the Allegheny Front. It's going to be another deck to go through. It's a starter deck. It's one of the first four we put together. Let's see. It's from the Black Moshannon State Park area, but species in this could be found all along what's called the Allegheny Front, which is the eastern side of the Allegheny Mountains, from Pennsylvania all the way down through part of Virginia, I believe. So what we did as a family is we went camping, spent a few days on hiking trails with cameras, enjoyed some time at that location, even got some great beach time in. They actually have a beach where you can go and swim and such. And one unique fact there, a really cool fact, is the water is really acidic. That's how a peat bog is formed. It's really strong acid. It doesn't hurt your skin or anything. The water was great, but the depth of the water where you would look down in, sometimes it gets murky and dark. In this area with the peat bogs, where this river was and this pool was that we could go swimming, the water would turn like this dark brownish red. 4 feet in, maybe at 6 foot depth, you couldn't see anymore. It was really unique the way that it was set up. Very rich in minerals and stuff like that, but overall it was a really cool experience for us. We got to talk to some of the locals there, and we got to check out the visitor center as well. But more than anything, we went there to get pictures. And so in the deck, just like any other, there's 5 humans and 5 multiplayer cards. Let's go over the humans briefly. We kept it kind of close to home. There's 2 specialists in here, but for the most part, this is one of the first 4 decks we put together, so we didn't even have that thought put together about bringing in unique specialists for each deck. So we have the Grandma Strome. When she's played, when she's in play, that ecosystem can draw an additional card at the beginning of their turn. And then you have Grandma Moore, which gives the player the ability to skip the discard phase. And then you have the 2 sisters, Thea and Maya, and their card, when they're in play, protects you from extinction. And then if you were to use their special ability, they would allow all players to draw 3 cards, and then they get discarded. So then we go to the botanist, which is somebody who focuses on plants, studies plants, and this is Tim Alderton, works down in North Carolina. I believe it's an arboreum. He has 2 actions. Standing action, when Tim's in play, that ecosystem is protected from an invasive plant species, which is a multiplayer card. We'll get into that at some point, but basically it's a multiplayer card that crowds out other plants. Or Tim can be discarded, and you can locate and play one plant species from the deck or discard pile. Now, even if you locate and play a really cool plant, you're still held to the main rules, which is it has to have its requirements met or that plant will die. It just goes to the discard pile, so keep that in mind. The 5th human is the conservation engineer. This is Joe Fidor. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Another great guy. When standing action, so whenever he's in play, you can keep a 20-point plus card in your hand, and you don't have to discard it even if you were required to discard a card. Or the special action is you can discard him, and then you can go and locate and play a 20-point plus card from the deck or discard pile. Same thing as Tim, though. Once again, when you bring that out, the requirements have to be met or it just dies. Okay, so it's a really good card for towards the end of the game, 9th or 10th round. Very effective. Let's go over the 5 special regions. No, not special regions. What is that, born yesterday? The 5 multiplayer cards, and these are old cards. They don't have the red borders on these ones. These are demo decks that we use. Okay, so you have locate species, and this allows you to locate and play a species from one ecosystem into another. So you can use it to kill off a really high point card, or to bring that high point card over to your ecosystem, or you can use it. How else would you do? Oh, in case you have a species that's crippling your ecosystem, maybe it's got a multiplayer card caught on it, for instance, like invasive plant, you can take that and relocate it to somebody else's so their ecosystem gets crippled. That's a good one. I like the first 4 decks that we put out. I really like, because the girls sat down at the table and really worked on the multiplayers with me and came up with what they were. So this is another good example. Ideal conditions, which means that everybody draws 3 cards. So the goal is, obviously the theme here is that the ecosystems all have ideal conditions for more species to come out. Forest Fire is the next one, and that is an aggressive multiplayer card. You would play this on somebody else's forests, unless you have your ecosystem set up for fields, I don't know, or grasslands. But you would play this, you would stack 3 forest regions underneath this card, and then they count as grasslands from that point forward. Extinction. It takes any of that specific species and they are now extinct. So everybody's decks and discard piles, everybody's play areas, the ecosystems, they all get searched. And then whatever that species is, that whoever played this calls that species gets removed from the game for that game. And then one not so deadly is Blight. And it's basically, you play this on a plant species, and at the end of that player's next turn, that plant gets blighted, it dies, it goes to the discard pile, and this gets returned to the original player in their discard pile. Okay, so those are the multiplayers. We have one special region for the Peat Bogs deck, and it's Farmer's Cove. It's worth 0. Normally regions are worth 1 point, but every time you add an additional card or stack an additional region into that card, and there's other things that apply too, it goes down in point value. So this is worth 0 points, but it provides a grassland region, and it also provides a running water region, 2 regions in 1 card. Okay. Then we have a couple of grassland regions. We have 4 of them. And then we have several standing water regions. I didn't even count them, but there's a whole bunch, because the peat bogs grow in mostly a standing water region environment. Now with this deck, it's unique. It has 2 condition cards. It has peat bogs and it has caves and caverns. These are very unique because these cards are needed. These are things that happen in nature very slowly over a long period of time, and they're needed because for you to be able to play the high point cards, you have to have one of these out. And most of the time winning the game comes down to being able to play one of those. So I want to show you the red and yellow sphagnum moss, if I can find it. So the red sphagnum is one, and then the Atlantic or yellow sphagnum moss is the other. This sphagnum moss is what generates, this is the core of a peat bog system. So these 2 cards are pretty important for that. And the reason that they're important is, let me pull the others out here, is you have, let's see, yep, 3 very unique high point cards that are all carnivorous. So you have the threadleaf sundew, you have the purple pitcher plant, and you have the purple bladderwort. And all 3 require, is it bladderwort? Nope, it's just endangered, so it requires a tiny invertebrate. It's only worth 10 points, but these other 2 require peat bogs, and they require the sphagnum moss, some form of sphagnum moss. So those are your high point cards that you'd be bringing out. You have a lot of variety of plants that show up in an ecosystem. Many of them have notes on them, like the alfalfa gives you the ability, once you play this, the round after alfalfa is played, a tiny or small invertebrate can be played directly from the deck or discard pile. There's several plants just like that where they have notes on them and you would just read them. And then you have the invertebrates, and there's several of them, but they're very common for this deck because we were still just getting our teeth cut and finding normal things, like the shallot aphids are very common. The oval amber snail, very common. Common housefly, okay, common water strider, so dusky slug, these kinds of things. They're all very easy to find. The aphid does have a ladybug that comes after it as well that's needed for it. And then you get to the animals, and there's a lot to choose from here. I'm not going to go into all the details, but you have a muskie, you got a northern water snake, a common snapping turtle, American raccoon, bald eagle, common for our region, especially through that national park area, or the state park area. So that's the summary of what's included with the Peat Bogs of the Allegheny Front. And this has some of the highest point cards for those first 4 decks in it. It doesn't have the highest point, but has several very large numbers. So that's the key for this deck. That's if you're studying the game and you're trying to figure out what deck to buy. Hopefully this video will help you figure that out. Or maybe you're looking for a specific combination. This deck is a good one for the carnivorous plants to get familiar with how they work and then what is required for them to exist. So have a great night, and hope this helps you with your games. All right.